I wanted to do this video a long time ago, and every time I found myself starting to talk, I lost my voice, which is ironic for me as a radio show host and a transformational life coach who helps individuals find their authentic voice, their authentic power, and go on and transform their lives. For some reason, this topic wasn't coming forward for me. It was buried pretty deep. I didn't feel that I was good enough to bring this out. The shame, the guilt, the trauma that I had experienced was immense. And so by coming forward and stretching myself out of this comfort zone, I am continuing my healing process, and I'm also hoping to help you heal as well. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about narcissistic abuse. I had the most amazing opportunity last week to interview my coach, my mentor, and my guide in this process, the amazing Kim Saeed, owner and founder of Let Me Reach. And so if you're interested in hearing more about my own personal journey through narcissistic abuse, my recovery, and Kim's advice on how you too can begin to heal and move past this, then stay tuned. So let me go ahead without further ado and say hello to Kim Saeed. Hello, my dear. How are you?
Oh, Renee, thank you so much for your very kind and sweet introduction. It's just such an honor to be on your show today.
Oh, thank you. It is a true honor of mine. And as I said here in the promo, you have been an inspiration to me. And many of my listeners already know my story. But for new individuals who might be viewing this on YouTube, you came into my life several years ago when I was in the midst of a narcissistic relationship and trying to find my own journey through that, my own path. And I have to say that without you, the journey would have been so much more painful, so much more of a struggle. And you planted the seed inside my head that provided me a narrative that said I didn't have to stay there. I didn't have to keep doing that. And most specifically, that I could go ahead and recreate my own story and let that all go and do something new. And that's what the inner revolution is all about. It really is about that recreation of our identity. And there's no one out there doing that better than you. Thinking about narcissistic survivors, is there anything in particular when you're working with these individuals that you're seeing some common needs, some common patterns that are sort of emerging as you're starting to develop a recovery plan for these individuals?
There are patterns, Renee. And, when I first started my coaching practice, for example, I learned that although a lot of the people I worked with had, different circumstances, different careers, different family situations, a lot of their traumas were the same.
Mm.
They had struggling with the same challenges of, how do I leave this relationship or this situation? How do I maintain no contact once I'm finally out? And so I do have a program that I based on my coaching outline because everyone had the same struggles. And I didn't, realize it back then. Now I realize why that is. It's because of the trauma bonding, the biochemical addiction, we call it brainwashing, which is really the cognitive dissonance and the crippling self-doubt. And so that's when I decided to create a program for that. And I have one. There are others out there as well. But there are some definite steps involved in leaving this kind of relationship. And there's a bit of a formula that people should probably know about in their own recovery journeys.
And I had the fortunate opportunity to actually have a coaching session with Kim, and it was the most enlightening, most cathartic experience, I have to say, in my healing journey. And I thought I was doing well and moving on, and then found myself still stuck, found myself still struggling at times, and was able to have a session with Kim. And Kim, you said something to me that I'm hoping we can chat a little bit about here. You brought up a notion of love addiction. And that was the aha moment for me. And I think that was the missing piece for me. I'd been doing all this work on energy healing and, the essential oils, as you had recommended, and the aromatherapy and, my traditional therapy. But there was something that was missing as I was thinking about moving forward in my relationships, just with people in general. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and why that's a significant aspect to think about in recovery?
Absolutely. I don't really talk about love addiction a whole lot because people don't like to hear that. They don't like to consider themselves addicts.
Mm-hmm.
There's a feeling of victim shaming that people take on when I discuss love addiction, and it's really nothing to be ashamed about. In fact, in my own journey, when I started learning about love addiction and what it is and what the symptoms are, that's when I finally realized, oh my gosh, I'm a love addict. And that was a huge turning point in my own journey. So love addiction is really, it's a lot like the same feelings that we have during that love bombing phase. And that's why I even wrote an article titled, Love Bombing is the Gateway Drug to Love Addiction.
Mm.
And it's true. So signs that you might be a love addict are, we hanging on to that fantasy. We have that fantasy of the perfect love, and that we can be with this person for 20 years and we're still going to have that same intensity, that same chemistry. We should always expect love letters and roses every single day, and that sort of thing. So there's that fantasy. And I joked with another colleague that what we're really expecting is a Disney character, meaning that relationships are not really like that. They are typically in the beginning, but then that's all based on lust and chemistry. You don't really know the person. What you know about them is based on a fantasy that we project upon them. And so once you are with someone longer and longer, and you really do get to know them, that's when some people start feeling like, oh gosh, I don't feel the same way about this person anymore. And they may start seeking out excitement. So signs that you're a love addict could be having little or no boundaries in your relationships, or sharing really sensitive information too quickly. And I remember doing that myself, like maybe going out on a date with someone and suddenly you're sharing these really intimate thoughts, feelings. You're sharing things about your background that really you're telling to a complete and total stranger.
Yeah.
Or desperately wanting to be rescued from being so alone. Being consumed with finding love when you first leave a relationship. So when you talked about love addiction, Renee, what symptoms did you recognize in yourself?
Oh, I would say the most significant one for me was thinking about how after you've been in such a traumatic relationship, whether it's narcissist or just some other traumatizing relationship, that you have been on this high for so long. You've come to believe this is a normal level of relationship, whether that's sexual, whether that's, emotional or anything else. And you've been up so high, your oxytocin levels have been so high. And then you come down and you meet a normal person who does things at a normal level. And for some reason, that normal level feels boring, feels unfulfilling, feels like this just can't be right. And then you have to sort of retrain yourself, right? This is what I think I've learned so significantly. You have to retrain yourself that you have a new baseline now, right? You have this new emotional level that might even be less than you were before because you might have experienced PTSD or whatever emotional aspect. And you kind of have to remind yourself that this is your new normal. This is your new level. And for me, that was scary. That was really scary, I have to say, because I thought, wow, this doesn't feel so good. This isn't very exciting. Is this really all there is? And I realized it was me. It wasn't them. And that was so big, right? Absolutely.
We're looking for someone to project images to our subconscious minds, how we want how we want to perceive ourselves. So part of that is, when you are in a new relationship and you're having all that chemistry and the fun, that makes us feel like we're worthy and that we're not only worthy of love, but just of someone's attention. But that is not always a good indicator that you're in a good relationship, as we both know.
Do you have any other suggestions, things like that, as working through the trauma bond, working through the love addiction for our listeners and viewers today?
It is difficult. I wish there were an easy way around it. I have actually a webinar where I talk about breaking, 7 steps that you can use to break the trauma bond, and to talk about things like letting go of the fantasy and accepting that this person may never be the person you want them to be. And the way to really work through that is to ask yourself, how long have I been with this person? And in some cases, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. If they were going to change, they would have changed by now.
Mm-hmm.
And then things like, well, are they making progress? Are they making any lasting changes? So, and I say in my webinar, don't give them credit because they went with you one time to a counseling session and then they turn around and went back to their old ways. That just doesn't count.
Right.
A lot of abusers will do that. It's just part of the image they want to project. It's part of the gaslighting, part of the manipulation. So just because someone went to counseling with you doesn't mean they're trying.
Right.
Keep a journal and write down things because we do often forget about abusive episodes. And I remember, I started a journal very early on in my own relationship, and I went back through my journal and read the things I'd written, and I could not remember half of them.
Wow.
It's very scary. And so part of that is dissociating. It's not just denial. Part of it is denial, but some of it could be a genuine dissociating, and that's scary. So, we need to learn how to not normalize these abusive behaviors. One other way you can determine if you are trauma bonded is you have very conflicting thoughts and ways that you describe your relationship, even if it's just to yourself. Mm-hmm. So in 1 minute, you might feel like, I hate this person. I hate my life with them. I can't believe I'm with the person like this. And then maybe after, a stint of hoovering, or they're coming back around apologizing, and you're thinking, oh, I don't know how I could ever live without this person.
Yeah.
That's a sign of trauma bonding. So it does take a lot of mindful awareness to work through that, and to, basically forgiveness should have an expiration date.
Wow.
Because it does turn into a form of enabling after a while. And I was not able to see that while I was in the relationship. I only recognized that in hindsight. And so even though I just said that it's a form of enabling, it's not to shame anyone. It's just to say, are you making excuses for someone who continues to hurt you and who you know will continue to hurt you?
Thank you for watching this video today as I interviewed Kim Saeed, owner and founder of Let Me Reach. As I said at the beginning of this video, this was a reach for me. This was a stretch directly out of my comfort zone to come forward and talk about a very challenging time in my life, my recovery from narcissistic abuse. I was physically abused, verbally abused, and psychologically abused. As a woman with high levels of education, I felt the most immense amount of shame that I should have known better. I should have done better. No one is exempt. Anyone who is loving and compassionate and who desires to be in a relationship can easily become a victim of narcissistic abuse. But as Kim shared with us today, there is much hope. And the first step is acknowledging that you may have an addiction, a love addiction that may have drew you to the narcissist in the first place. If you like this video and would like to see more of these here on The Inner Revolution, hit that subscribe button below, click on that bell so that you get notified when the next video is released. And just to let you know, video number 2 with Kim Saeed is going to be released tomorrow. So tune in when we talk about those negative emotions of shame and guilt and why we struggle to be able to be comfortable at times being alone. This is Dr. Renee of Transcendent Heart Life Coaching saying thank you from The Inner Revolution.